How many goblins could a goblin gob if a goblin could gob goblins?
Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCGPLAYER. And if you'd like to join the generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is one of the first few ones that I filmed with the Pun Squad, and it's featuring my Karador deck. I keep a Swords to Plowshares, Fauna Shaman, Entomb, Grim Haruspex, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Wooded Bastion, and Command Tower. Adam still has his Akiri and Tymna deck, keeping Wear and Tear, Wrath of God, Helm of the Host, Sigarda's Aid, Dragonskull Summit, and a Swamp. Scott has borrowed Peter's Yuriko deck, keeping Karn's Temporal Sundering, Clever Impersonator, Go for the Throat, Command Tower, Swamp, Island, and Terramander. Peter is playing his other deck, Yeva, keeping a Llanowar Elves, Elvish Guidance, Song of the Dryads, Concordant Crossroads, Sword of the Pay Ruins, Wirewood Lodge, and a Forest. Peter wins the die roll and starts us off. Peter plays a Forest and casts Llanowar Elves. I play a Command Tower. Adam plays a tapped Dragonskull Summit. Scott plays an Island and casts a Terramander. Peter plays a Wirewood Lodge and taps out completely to cast Elvish Guidance on his Forest. I play a Plains and pay 2 for a Fauna Shaman. Adam plays a Mountain, passing. Scott plays a Command Tower and goes to combat. He swings the Flyer at me, and before damage, Commander Ninjutsu's out Yuriko. I then take 1 Commander damage, and we get a Yuriko trigger with Scott revealing his top card. It's Buried Ruin, which means no extra damage. He then moves through his phases, discarding down to 7 during his cleanup step. Peter plays a Forest and taps his Enchanted Forest and Llanowar Elves to cast Song of the Dryad and puts it onto Yuriko. I play a Wooded Bastion and drop Aura Shards. I head to combat, hitting Peter with a Fauna Shaman, and pass. Adam plays a Swamp, missing the critical 3rd color for his deck unfortunately, and has to pass. Scott plays a Swamp and taps it for a Soul Ring. He then taps more mana, including Yuriko, to help pay for an Augury Owl, who comes in and scries 3 for Scott. He rearranges the cards and surprisingly keeps all 3 on top. We then see the Terramander rejoin the party, and Scott passes. Peter pays 4 mana in his main phase for a Vizier of the Menagerie. This lets him look at his top card, and he then cycles Tranquil Thicket to draw a card. Reliquary Tower is then played as his land for turn, and he passes to me. I draw for turn, and activate Fauna Shaman in my main phase, discarding Knight of Autumn to the ability to go and find a creature card. I start by thinking that it'll be Sakura Tribe Elder because I need lands, but settle on a Hermit Druid because I'm a degenerate. I then cast the Druid once it's in my hand, and as it enters, blow up the Elvish Guidance as it comes in with the Aura Shards trigger. I then pass to Adam while shuffling. Adam sadly draws and has to pass. Scott draws for turn and goes to combat. He boops Peter and I, as Scott calls it, for 1 apiece. He then passes with way more mana than I'm comfortable with open. Peter draws for turn and looks at his top card with the Vizier. He plays a creature off the top, casting Elvish Visionary, and draws as it enters. Peter then looks at his top card again, and passes. I draw, and activate Hermit Druid, milling until I hit a basic. We go pretty deep despite my having 10 basics in the deck. I stop once I hit a Swamp, and play it for my turn. I then count up my yard, and I'm able to cast Karador for only 1 white, green, and black mana, doing so. My commander comes in, and I use the Aura Shards trigger to blow up Scott's Soul Ring, and that's it for my turn. Adam asks how many artifacts are on the battlefield, of which there aren't any. He then has to discard down to 7 and passes. Scott draws and goes to combat, once more swinging 1 at me and 1 at Peter. We each take 1 apiece, and Scott has to pass. Peter draws for turn and looks at his top card with the Vizier's ability. He passes, and at the end of turn, Scott casts Go for the Throat to take out the Hermit Druid. I untap and draw, playing Horizon Canopy as my land drop. I then use Karador's ability to cast 1 creature from my graveyard on my turn to bring out a Doom Whisperer, losing 1 life from the Horizon Canopy being tapped for mana. I don't want to blow up the song or on Yuriko as it enters though, and instead go to combat. I smack Scott for 3 with Karador, and pass to Adam. Adam draws and plays a mountain. He then plays out Duretti, upticking the walker, and discarding 2, and then drawing 2. Scott's turn really isn't what he hopes for, as he doesn't have access to Yuriko really, and he passes to Peter, who at the end of turn, flashes out Yeva. Peter draws and looks at his top card with a Vizier. He's also land-starved like Adam. He plays out a Sword of Peyrunes and passes. At the end of turn, I activate the Doom Whisperer, losing 2 life to Surveil 2, and decide to put both into my graveyard. For my turn, I pick up my graveyard and go through it to see what I can cast. I bring up Birds of Paradise, casting it, and as it comes in, blow up Peter's sword. Moving to combat, I swing the Whisperer at Peter, who connects, and I then pass to Adam. Adam plays his first planes for the game, and then casts the EDH All-Star, Smothering Tithe. He upticks Duretti again, discarding nothing though, just adding the loyalty counters, and passes to Scott. Scott draws, and doesn't pay the 2, so Adam gets a treasure. He then passes to Peter. Peter also draws and doesn't pay the 2, playing out a force for his land for turn. He looks at his top card, and goes at Duretti with 2 creatures. They connect, taking the walker out. On my turn, instead of drawing, I dredge life from the loam back, milling myself for 3. I then lose 1 life as I tap the Horizon Canopy to cast the newly returned life from the loam, and bring some lands from my graveyard into my hand. I grab a Verdant Catacombs, Savannah, and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. I play the Urborg as my land for turn, and then pay 3 mana, casting a Grim Haruspex. I then pass, discarding down to 7. Adam uses a treasure and taps 3 mana to cast Wrath of God. The board is wiped, and I get to draw 3 cards as the Grim Haruspex sees my creatures dying. Adam unfortunately misses some of this, and he then passes turn. Scott draws and passes. Following Scott's lead, Peter draws and has to pass. I play Savannah for turn and evoke Reviarch in my main phase. It enters, and I immediately have to sacrifice it. I also have an Aura Shards trigger, and I use it to destroy Adam's Smothering Tithe. As it leaves the battlefield, I get to return up to 2 target creatures with power 2 or less from my graveyard to the battlefield. This lets me bring back my Recruiter of the Guard and a Blood Artist. With the Recruiter entering, I get to tutor for a creature with 2 toughness or less from my library, and Adam isn't super thrilled with this. He flashes out Aven Mind Sensor, and I can only look at my top 4. I do hit 1 target, Grand Abolisher which I reveal and put to hand. I then pass to Adam. Adam counts up the board and plays out Akiri in his main phase boldly. If only he knew what was in store for her come Zendikar Rising. He then moves to combat, hitting me for 2 with the Mind Sensor and passing to Scott. Scott draws and has to pass again. At the end of turn, Peter uses Krosan Grip to blow up my Aura Shards. He's not done though, and once it resolves, use Noxious Revival to put the Vizier back on top of his library. Peter untaps and draws his Vizier. He recasts it and looks at his top card. He taps 1 green for a Quirion Ranger and passes turn. I play a Mana Confluence as my land for turn, and then cast an Entomb for 1 black, having forgotten completely about the Aven Mind Sensor. I pick one of the top 4 cards and bin it, then shuffle. I'm then able to cast Karador once more for his reduced cost, who once he resolves, lets me cast Ramunap Excavator from my graveyard. I play a land from my graveyard, Isolated Chapel as my land for turn. I then go to combat, hitting Scott for 1, and pass. Adam plays a mountain, and casts Tymna in his main phase. He goes to combat, swinging the Aven Mind Sensor at me, and Akiri at Scott. Before damage, I use Swords to Plowshares on the Aven Mind Sensor, which has Adam gaining 2 life, while Scott takes the hit. In his post-combat main phase, Adam then uses Tymna's ability, paying 1 life to draw 1 card, and he passes to Scott. On Scott's turn, he plays his own Urborg, and things are just super swampy now, and he then pays 3 mana for a Thassa, passing. Peter draws and looks at his top card with Vizier. He then taps all of his lands, and uses the Ranger to bounce a forest back to hand to untap an elf. He replays the forest as land for turn, and taps it for another mana to cast Yeva, passing. I play a Canopy Vista, which comes in untapped since I have enough basics. I cast a Karmic Guide, who enters and brings back the Reveillark. I then cast Survival of the Fittest and activate it, discarding Grey Merchant of Asphodel, and with no Aven Mind Sensor to stop me, I go through the entirety of my library to find a creature instead of my top 4. I reveal a Viscera Seer, which will let me combo off with the Karmic Guide and Reveillark and Blood Artist, and the guys have seen enough, scooping it up. Game review time. So one of the benefits of lending out your decks is knowing it in and out, and in this case, Peter certainly knew how to stop Yuriko in her tracks. A lot of the deck is built around connecting with ninjas and having Yuriko out, and with her being a tree, Scott couldn't do very much. Adam's Tymna and Akiri deck could have been much more of a contender had he been able to draw white earlier on in the game. As it was, as everyone else was establishing their board states, Adam was just watching on in envy. By the time he was able to do stuff, cards like Smothering Tithe and Wrath of God, while very good cards, weren't pulling him ahead so much as they were equalizing the board. Considering the fact that I tried to tutor for something with Recruiter of the Guard before, I really don't know what was going through my mind when I cast the Entomb on the following turn. That was a pretty bad punt, but thankfully I was able to save myself by removing the Aven Mind Sensor before my next turn. I don't think Peter has his Yeva deck anymore, and instead it's been shifted to Kinnan. I do like Yeva as a card though, since flashing in creatures is always great, and especially in a green elf deck, you have tons of mana to be able to do so at the end of other people's turns. Unfortunately, it seemed like he wasn't able to draw lands or cheap creatures in this game. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.